Hello, I'm Mitty R. Smith, an attorney located in High Point, North Carolina. Today is Saturday, February 23rd, 2013, and I have with me, for the purpose of an interview, Katie Dorsett, Alma Adams, and Carolyn Coleman, three politically powerful and astute ladies who will be giving us their personal histories, their educational histories, and their thoughts about the political scene. Thank you, ladies, for being with me this morning. So we'll start. Ms. Dorsett, will you tell us your full name, where you were born, and when?
Katie Grace Dorsett from Mississippi. I was born in Mississippi, July the 8th, 1932.
I'm Alma Adams, and I was born in High Point, North Carolina, May 27th, 1946.
I'm Carolyn Coleman. I was born in Savannah, Georgia, 1942.
Now, Katie, you indicated Mississippi. What city?
Shaw, Mississippi. Well, maybe I should do mine again.
No, that's all right. And what is that near? What is Shaw?
Well, near Greenville.
Oh, okay. All right. And now all of you have been politically involved here in Guilford County, North Carolina. When did you all come to Guilford County?
I came to North Carolina, to Greensboro, to work at A&T State University. And I started in 1955.
That's good. Now, Alma, I know that you were born here, but you were not raised here.
No, I was not.
Okay.
I left High Point 6 weeks old. My mother moved away, and I lived part of the time in Baltimore, Maryland. And about 15 years old, I moved to Newark, New Jersey, and grew up between Newark, East Orange, and Montclair, New Jersey. Graduated from Westside High School in Newark, and then returned to Guilford County to attend North Carolina A&T State University in 1964.
Okay, so you returned after having graduated from high school.
Absolutely, yeah.
Katie, you returned to work as an adult there at A&T.
I came as an adult after leaving Indiana University.
Okay.
I am born, of course, in Savannah, Georgia. I lived there throughout my college years, and from there I went to Tuskegee, Alabama, to work for the NAACP. From there to Memphis, Tennessee, back to Atlanta, and then to North Carolina in 1979 for the NAACP.
Katie, I read a little about your education,
Mm-hmm.
but would you tell us where you went to school, both elementary and high?
Okay. For elementary school, I went to a little school, Stephenville School, where my mother taught. And I went there at 8th grade. I went to a private boarding school, Southern Christian Institute in Edwards, Mississippi. And from there, I went to Alcorn State University for the bachelor's degree. And from there, Indiana University for the master's degree. And from there, I came here to work at A&T.
Alma, your education, both elementary.
I started elementary school in Baltimore, Maryland, actually. At all of the schools there had numbers. I believe our school number was 131. And I don't remember the name of the school, but
Okay.
I remember the number. I went to part junior high school there in Baltimore, Fannie L. Barber, and then went on to high school in Newark, Westside High School. I graduated from Westside High School there in Newark in 1964, and then made my way to North Carolina A&T.
Okay.
And I began elementary school at St. Benedict's Catholic School, finished the 6th grade there, and then middle school, I went to Haven Home, which was a governmental school. It was the county school, really. where blacks attended, and I'm saying that because we had passed so many white schools to get to that school. From there to Alfred E. Beach High School, then on to Savannah State University, and my master's at A&T, North Carolina A&T State University.
Okay, so you all started in public school.
Yes.
Carolyn and Alma, you all completed in public school.
Yes.
Now,
No, you started in
Catholic
parochial
school.
school. But now tell us about the boarding school. Was that an all-black boarding
Yes,
school?
it was, but it was mostly white missionaries who taught there. They were people from kind of all over the country. It's now closed, but it was quite a prominent school because most of the people who taught there were well trained. Some were from other countries, but they were on the faculty there. We had a white president, and we were about 2 miles from town, the little town of Edwards, Mississippi. But it was quite well known, and it was at that time considered to be a sister school to Tougaloo
Okay.
and Talladega.
Mhm.
So you've heard of those?
Yes.
Mhm. Well, that's
Was it co-ed?
Yes, it was. But I was like 12 years old when I went there, and most of the children, well, it went from like 7th grade through 12th grade, and most of us were very young, and we had house mothers and things. But I went there for the 4 years.
Let me ask you, because oftentimes when I read novels, boarding schools are involved. And I've often wondered, I've never had the opportunity to talk with someone who went to a boarding school, but to leave home at such a young age, what do you remember feeling about that? And how far away from home was it?
It was a long way from home, and at that time, you you'd go on the bus, but it was about 200 or 300 miles from home, and you didn't get to home except for Christmas and the end of the year. But one of the women who worked there was a classmate of my mother's, so she kind of took me on as her child, and that I felt very comfortable after I got there. But it was real interesting when you got to be old enough for the boys to come to see you. We'd have to sit in the lobby, and you'd have the chairs with the girl going one way and the boys' chair going turning this back so you could look at each other. And the matron would come through there about every 10 minutes to see that you didn't get too close to each other. So, but it was quite an experience.
Katie, I've seen chairs that are said to be courting chairs.
Mhm.
Was it that kind of chair, or did they have two chairs just placed? Okay.
Two chairs, and this chair was going one way and
Yes.
the other, and you could look at each other. And you'd start, maybe they said they could come, and all the boys would come in at a certain time, maybe like 2 o'clock, and then they could stay to 4 o'clock, and at 4 o'clock, they had to get up and go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alma, you also attended a somewhat different school than what we generally think of as a regular public school. What was the nature of that for you?
Well, it was a regular public school, but I do recall that it was while it was integrated because I was there and my sister, we were probably the first 2 or 3 African Americans who attended school, and I can remember it was close enough for us to walk to school. So we walked, and it was several blocks, but I guess when you're young, you don't really count that distance. But I can recall one day going to school, and we were feeling very uncomfortable there. But I can recall a young white boy asked me when he looked at me, "Is that black or does it rub off?" Because they hadn't seen many black children at the school. My cousins, a couple of my cousins ended up joining us, and they didn't stay because they were so uncomfortable. But I can remember finishing there and then going on at least my first couple of years, or at least the first year at junior high school, and then moving on back to New Jersey.
Okay. Carolyn, you went to a Catholic school at the very beginning. First, I'm going to ask you, because there are always the jokes about the nuns being mean. Were they mean to you?
Some
any of the kids?
Some of them were, but I think they were just really tough. They wanted us to do well. And so maybe they were tougher than you would think of some teachers being. However, when I went to high school, I had some pretty tough teachers there too. So I'm not sure that they were any tougher than anyone else.
But in terms of paddling,
Oh, yes, you got the paddle in your hands. You had to open your
at
hands.
both or at more at one of than the other?
No, that was only at the Catholic school.
That's okay. And so you were there up until what grade?
Sixth grade. It went to sixth grade, and at that time we didn't have higher grades in the Catholic school.
And it too was co-ed?
Yes,
Now, how many sisters and brothers do you all have? Did you come from small or large family?
I come from a big family. I have 7 sisters and brothers. I have only one sister and brother living now, but there were 8 of us, and I am the youngest of the 8.
Okay.
My parents, I had one sister and 2 brothers. My mother married twice, so I have a half brother from my mother's marriage. My sister, who was 2 years older than I, died at 26 years old from sickle cell. And so I have an older brother and a younger brother now.
I'm going to come back to that subject
Okay.
later, on something that I know you're doing currently.
Okay.
I had 3 brothers. Of course, I was the only girl, and the younger of the 2 until I was 9 years old, and then there was another brother born. So they ended up being a family of 4.
Now, Katie, did any of your other siblings go to this boarding school?
Yes. Well, my sister taught there, and then my brother went to school there at the same time. So just 2 of us. The others went to another public school closer to home.
This is very interesting. Y'all have such varied backgrounds, and yet at some point in the future, you'll be coming together. We'll get to that. Now, in terms of your parents, I heard you say that your mother taught school.
She did.
What did your father do?
My father was a farmer, a very proud farmer. And just on the side, he loved to get up early in the morning, and he would go out and just look at his crops and everything. And I remember saying to myself that I don't want to be my own boss if I got to get up that early, go out. But he thought that being his own boss was the height of his ambition, and he was. To him, he was a successful farmer.
What size farm did he have?
Well, it was about 80 acres, and we had tenants, a couple of tenants, and it was interesting because, you'd always have to furnish these tenants. And then by the time you furnish them and give them money, you'd wake up one morning and the house was clean. They were all gone. So that was an ordeal. And then he went from that farm with cotton farming to cattle farming, where it was less stress and he didn't have to have lots of people working for him.
Now, I take it your father was not what was one would think back then, a tenant farmer, sharecropper farmer.
No,
He owned his.
he owned it, yeah.
I'm going to ask something about that later. What did your parents do?
Well, my mother was a very strong woman. Is a very still today at 87, and she basically raised us. My father was not in the home. I met my father actually when I was 15 years old, and it was really kind of an interesting way. I sort of met him on the street in front of the place where we were living. But my mother did what we called in those days domestic work, working in white folks' houses,
Yes.
really. So early on, I learned how to clean up because my mother was very detailed about that. So she did that for most of her life. And then when she returned to High Point, probably when she was in her 50s, She
So High
worked
Point
for
was home for
furniture. She worked for a furniture company.
Okay,
here.
but
Yeah.
High Point is her home?
She was born in the little community of Georgetown, which is out in not far from here,
Oh, okay.
but more between High Point and Winston-Salem.
All
I
right.
think it's a little
Okay.
community out there. They call it Georgetown. A lot of my family members grew up out there. My grandfather and a lot of her sisters.
So she was returning home.
She was. She was
Okay.
returning home. When I did meet my father actually was worked for a New London in Connecticut in a shipyard, and he became a welder. And so that's kind of what he did throughout his life. And of course, when I did get to meet him and to know him, and I was 15 years old, and I can recall that he actually drove me to North Carolina to school. So he sort of became a part of my life
Once he came back.
after that.
Okay.
Up until that time, my mother married again, and I lived with my stepfather in Baltimore and my mother, and he worked for Bethlehem Steel Company there. I don't remember a whole lot about him other than he was very, very strict with us. And he was a very religious man, and was really very kind to my mom. He was a little bit older than she was, but he took her 3 children along with her, and they got married, and then there was my youngest brother was born, Benny.
Carolyn?
Well, my mother was for about 5 years a public school teacher. During that time, they had what they called, I think, a normal degree, where they only went to school for 2 years. They went to college for 2 years and could become a teacher. After teaching about 5 years, the rules changed, and you had to return and of course take the additional 2 years in order to remain as a teacher. So my mother opened. She left the school system and opened the dry cleaners, and she was in several businesses. She had a dry cleaners, a restaurant, and she did a number of other things. Um, my parents were divorced when I was about 18 months old. So my mother remarried later, and it was really my stepfather that reared us. My stepfather was a boiler fireman at Hunter Air Force Base, and left that after a number of years. I think he actually retired from Hunter, and then became a merchant marine. Now, merchant marine is a person who works on the ships that carry products, the larger products to different countries that are sold from America.
You know
And
about how old he was?
uh, gosh, he might have been in his 40s, and could have been early 50s. As a child, you never know what age they are. They just seem like they're old people. I'm not sure, but he did that until he finally retired. He actually, as I said, reared us, and because of his gainful employment, we had a fairly decent life. And of course, my mother was always an entrepreneur, so she of course contributed to the income of the family. But I think it was more the fact that he was gainfully employed that we did okay.
And that she could engage in the entrepreneurial types of
Yes,
interests that she had.
yes.
Kate, I have to ask, you said that your father owned about 80 acres.
Mhm.
Do you have any understanding or appreciation what it took for him to accumulate that back at the time that he did?
Well, it was really inherited,
Okay.
but from his parents and my mother's parents. So they didn't have to purchase it. I mean, the ownership just stayed on in the family.
Okay.
But it was really a commitment to be successful with it, and he took great pride in it.
That begs even a deeper question.
Mhm.
How did your grandfather accumulate that?
Now,
your grandparents back at that
I
time?
don't know a lot about the history of
Okay.
my grandparents. My grandmother died the year I was born. And my grandparents on my father's side, I didn't know at all. I really didn't know either side.
Okay.
And we haven't done a lot of research. They never shared a lot with us. I just didn't know. My mother had one brother, and my dad had a brother and a sister. But beyond that, I didn't know anything about their family, their parents.
Did you ever know whether or not your parents' 80 acres was part of a larger tract, or was that
I
what
don't
they
know.
inherited total?
I think
With your
for my
grandparents?
mother, it was part of a larger tract that was divided between her brother and her. I don't know about my father.
Okay. I think it would be very interesting to know how a black man back at that time
Mhm.
accumulated and held on to
Yeah.
that kind of land.
Yeah. And you know, right now we still own it, and my sisters would really like to sell it because it's a headache, you know, getting it rented and all of that. But for me, it was just something that they made such a sacrifice, and it's just been from their inheritance to my parents and then to us till it's very difficult for me to want to sell it.
Who do you think will prevail in that? Do you have any?
Well, at this point, you know, we haven't bothered. It's hard to read it, but I mean, they listen to me. So. They do.
And that raises the other question.
Mhm.
Do you all have many nieces and nephews? Or
Not
children? First, tell me about your children. Do you have children?
I have one daughter, and I have a son who passed away with sickle cell at 25. And then I have I guess maybe I have one, two, about four nieces and two nephews.
From 8 children.
That's right. Mhm.
Okay.
I have two children. I have a son who's 42 and a daughter who's 40, and each of them have two children, a boy and a girl. So I have 4 grandchildren. My mother there were 7 siblings. She is the only living one now, and each of her brothers and sisters had children. There must be, I must have 30 or 40 cousins,
Okay.
and many of them live right in the High Point area. So while I have a somewhat of small immediate family, we have lots of cousins, and all of my aunts are passed away on my mother's side and on my father's side. Actually, I did get to know all of them. My father had he had a brother and a sister, and they're both deceased. We have cousins now. So I have a lot of first cousins, second cousins, third cousins. So it's pretty large family in terms of that, in terms of what my parents left, and the connections that they have with their children and their children's children.
Carol?
I have one son and 2 grandchildren. I think about 6 nieces and 4 nephews. It's interesting as Alma talked about having cousins because my mother was born in South Carolina, and I'm not sure if they called everybody in South Carolina cousin because every time we went there, I met a different cousin. And as I've tried to in recent years go back and determine who was whose child and how they were related, I just have never been able to do that. And so I'm just claiming half of South Carolina as my cousin.
Now, how many siblings did your mother have who might have been there?
My mother had 1 brother and 3 sisters.
Well, I think that I think it's to claim half of South Carolina might be a bit
Yeah.
stretching it. That's stretching it a bit. You didn't mention grandkids. Do you have?
I don't have
You don't have.
grandchildren.
You're like me. Now, Alma, there's something else I happen to know. You didn't mention that your mother is she an evangelist or pastor?
Well, my mother for the past, I guess, 30 years has been a minister. She did her training in Chicago, Bethlehem Healing Temple there, and is in the apostolic faith. About 4 years ago, she came out of the full-time pastoring. She has a very small mission that she started here in High Point Deliverance Temple. She still attends, but does not actually, conduct the services. But they still see her as the pastor and the mother. There's someone who was actually taken over, who my mother trained. She got into the ministry probably midway of her life. And she talks about having lived the life before the ministry, and so, which was very active. But
I don't know that I'm going to pursue that.
Right, but she's a very spiritual woman, and is still very clear about that, even at her age. She's 87. She's in relatively good health. While she does have some health issues, but and she's pretty much homebound just because she wants to be. But yeah, we grew up in the church, and as a matter of fact, I was probably more involved in the church as a young person than my mom was, because my mother's mother died when she was, I think, about 11 or 12 years old, and she was raised by her aunt, who was my great aunt.
Okay.
And I actually refer to her as my grandmother. And we lived with her for a while in New Jersey, in Montclair. And she was a very religious woman. She was in the Baptist church, and I remember actually joining St. Paul Baptist Church in Montclair very early and getting baptized there. So I sort of got my first spiritual bounding from the person I call my grandmother, who was my mother's aunt and really my great aunt. And it was much later that my mother actually, really got very involved with the church and studied and has been. She was pastoring here in High Point for, I think they just celebrated 30 years.
Are all of you still very involved in churches?
Well, I'm not as involved as I used to be. I belong to Bethel AME. And it's interesting because my mother grew up in the AME church and joined the Baptist church because my father was active there. He was superintendent of the Sunday school, and at that time in the country, you had church 2 Sundays out of the month. And those other Sundays, you visited other churches. So my dad was very active, and we would go to church the first and third Sundays. You go to Sunday school and you stay for church, so it was an all-day celebration. And that was how I grew up. When I came to Greensboro, I was close to Bethel, and so I joined the AME church, and I have been involved in that church ever since I have been here. I was on the trustee board, but with the General Assembly, I wasn't here that often. So now I just attend. I'm not active, but in attendance.
Okay. Carolyn?
Well, I am.
I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm a member of New Zion Missionary Baptist Church in Greensboro. I have always been in the Baptist church wherever I've been. And I used to be a member of the W.D. Johnson Choir. I don't sing on the choir anymore because of the political work that I've been involved in. It's kept me away from the city during the week when we have rehearsals. So I just sing from the pew now. And at that point, I'll probably rejoin the choir. But I consider myself to be an active member, although I'm not participating in those kinds of activities in the church.
Yeah, I grew up attending St. Benedict's Catholic School as well as Peaceful Zion Baptist Church. My early years in the Catholic Church were such that from time to time I'd miss Mass, and the teacher said to me, Catholics don't miss Mass. So I knew I wasn't going to be a Catholic. So I joined the Baptist Church. basically I've been in the Baptist church all of my life, but my job has moved me about. And one of the places I lived in was Tuskegee, Alabama. There, the church that I enjoyed the most was the AME Zion Church. So I joined that church. When I moved to Atlanta with my job, I enjoyed the Church of God in Christ. So I joined that church. And of course, when I came to Greensboro, I moved back to the Baptist church. Now I'm a member of the same church as Alma Adams, New Zion Missionary Baptist Church. And there I serve as chairman of Christian education, and I'm chairing the Constitution Revision Committee, which is a trying, maybe challenging, I should say, job.
Okay. Carolyn, you were once, but your ex-husband, was he then a pastor, or did he become so after?
Yes, he. When I lived in Memphis, he became a pastor when I lived there, and of course there I was a member. I'd forgotten that I was a member of another church. That was the Baptist church. That was Boston Avenue Baptist Church, and then of course when I left there, he and I were separated and subsequently divorced. So I came to Baptist Church in Greensboro also.
Before I forget it, because twice I've heard you all have very close people, two of you have had very close people to die of sickle cell. And I said I would address it later, but I think I will do it now so that I won't run the risk of forgetting it. Alma, you own, I guess you own Atelier. Is that you own that art gallery?
I am the co-founder of African American Atelier, which is a nonprofit arts gallery organization. So I would say it's probably more owned by the board.
Okay.
But I have done a lot of work over the past 22 years in trying to lead the organization, raise money for the organization, and keep it afloat.
But right now, you all are doing something regarding sickle cell.
Yes, we are. And we're just.
Are both of you involved in that? That's Dr. Dean's sickle cell. I don't know that it's his, but he's the medical director.
Right, he is.
Of the sickle cell center that is newly being.
Yes.
That's right.
Okay. Are you all involved? Are you involved in that, Katie? I know
Well, I serve on the board for the Sickle Cell Association here, and I was chair of it, president, we called it president a long time ago, and then I gave it up when I went to political things, and because I just was away and didn't have the time. But I'm also on the national board, the Sickle Cell Disease Association of America, and I'm a past chair of that board. As a matter of fact, we're meeting this weekend. I leave on Friday for a board meeting. So I have been involved with sickle cell since my son was born. And he was diagnosed when he was about 2 years old. We kept seeing this hand swelling, a foot swelling, and we had a pediatrician here who kept trying to determine what the cause was. They ultimately found that it was sickle cell. So I really got involved and did all kinds of research. I went out in California because they were doing more out there with research. And so I went out there to see some of the people out there. The national organization was headquartered out there at the time. But there were a number of physicians out there who were associated with hospitals. And so I went out and visited with them and saw some of the activities they had. And one of the things I brought back to Greensboro was that they did a camp for children with sickle cell. Okay. And it was a week of wonderful activities. And of course, we had to connect with doctors who could be there in case some of the children got sick. But it has gotten to be an annual event here now, but they were doing that in California at the time. And so they were kind of ahead of us with things. And so, but we've made a lot of progress here. And we now are in several counties, but it started very small. And I was not the one who started. It was a group called the LaFems who started it. But I joined the board very early here and served with them for a long time.
Okay. And this weekend is when Atelier is involved with sickle cell.
Yes, and I will say that Katie was served on our committee, and what Atelier got involved because I was asked personally to assist Bill Porter, who is the fund developer for Cone Health,
This
to
center is
secure
part of Cone Hospital.
Cone Health.
Right,
Yes.
okay.
And so he asked, I was asked to help get some artwork for that facility because it's bare right now, and they didn't want to use hospital art. They wanted to have some real expressions there. So um, instead of just trying to find artists myself, I involved the African American Utility. I thought it would be a good opportunity to bring the community together to, first of all, increase the awareness about sickle cell and to get the community claiming ownership for this facility. It will be a 24/7 facility, comprehensive facility, the first in North Carolina and the second in the nation. So sickle cell patients will now basically have a home. They will not have to go to the emergency room. And
Okay.
I grew up with a sister who was diagnosed with sickle cell very early. She was, I think, about 2 or 3 years old. We were in Baltimore, Maryland, and so she spent a lot of time at Johns Hopkins. But one of the things that I remember the most, first of all, we shared the same room and sometimes the same bed. And while I just have a trait, I did not have the disease. But both
Okay.
my parents obviously had the trait to produce a child with the disease. And I just recall so many nights my sister just crying, just crying all night because of the pain with the joint swelling and so forth. And at that time, if you think about it, the 50s and so forth, there was very little known about it. They didn't know really how to treat it. I can recall that she would get oxygen, and through the period of the crisis, which lasted sometimes several days, sometimes almost a week, she was in terrible pain. And it just, that just really bothered me. But I would get up with my mother, who would wake me up 3, 4 in the morning. We'd go to the emergency room. We'd sit there for hours waiting for treatment. And that was my real introduction to this disease. My sister, once she'd get through the crisis, she appeared to be fine. She was always a very petite. She was only 4'11". She weighed about 98 pounds. But she was the oldest of the three of us. And she was a little bossy. I named my daughter after her. But she was a very a loving person. And I remember when after she'd get through a crisis, her boyfriends would come by, and she was all glamored up at the hospital, put her makeup and everything back on. It was like nothing ever happened. So she took it in stride. She learned to live with it. And I can remember very close to her death, she was just really very tired physically. And she would tell me, I kept a letter that she wrote to me for a long time, where she said, when she goes to the hospital now, she really doesn't even try to live.
So
Because she was just so tired of the pain and so forth.
So y'all have very emotional reasons for being active
Yeah.
with it. And so I think the first event was last night.
Yeah, we tried to we put out a search for artists to bring some work in for a juried exhibition that with hopes that we would sell the art. The donation would be made to the sickle cell, to the Cone Health, and we would build a collection, a permanent collection that could be housed in that center.
Now, Ella, let me ask you something on that. Because when I had it presented, I was at a meeting when I heard the presentation. Okay. It was not very clear to me. Would the public be paying for the art and the art would be taken to the center, or would the public purchase the art and the money used at the center?
Well, basically, Cone Health, I think, probably they had a budget to purchase art. And instead of just purchasing it outright, they would allow individuals to actually sponsor the work or underwrite the work, the check would be made out to Cone Health. So in a
So
sense,
they get
they're
the money
providing.
and the public walks off with the artwork
No, the public does not get the work. The work actually goes to the
to the
center.
center.
So it
Okay.
will be there. There will be there'll be a permanent plaque or affixed beside the work that would have the name of the artist, the name of the work, and the sponsors. And people could go in together. The work that we had ranged from $300 to $1,200, and so you could partner with someone. And we had a couple people do that last night to partner to make that purchase. So here's what the public gets an opportunity to get a tax write-off. They get an opportunity to have permanent connection with that center and with that work as it is housed
How
there.
did it go
The
last
art
night?
went very well. We sold half of the work that was there. We had 40 pieces in the show. There were 65 submitted for jury. We had a juried exhibition, so we had a selection of jurors who were in the arts to select the work. I was not one of the jurors. I did have a piece in the show that was selected for exhibition, and it was sold as well. And so the artists will get a percentage of the sale, and a very small percentage would come to the African American atelier.
And now the reason that sickle cell is so important to Black folk is why?
Well, it's more impacts the African American community, but now there are others who have sickle cell. And then you have the different types of sickle cell. You have the SS, the SC, and the thalassemia. So there's several different types, but it is not altogether an African American disease, but it does impact the African American community more so than any others. But I thought last night was really a wonderful opportunity, and I thought it was well attended. The attendance was good. And there were people who were truly interested. And we say that at the time our children were coming up, very few people knew about sickle cell. It's not a lot now who know about sickle cell. So it's still a disease that is not that much that's known about it. And I think that this was one way of sharing with the community that it is a family disease and it does impact the entire community.
Yeah, it does.
Now, in terms of, thank you both for that. I thought I better bring that in before I forget it later about the sickle cell and what y'all are doing. Now, back to your careers. You all have graduated from college and you're now, were you politically involved in the places that were not you so much, you were so young when you moved back here, or left where you grew up. But Carolyn, you and Katie, were you all politically involved in your home places before you moved to Guilford County?
Well, it's
Okay.
interesting how I became politically involved because I was one of the three first sit-in demonstrators arrested in Savannah, Georgia. From that, our youth council of the
How old
NAACP,
were you at that time?
I was 17.
Okay.
Our youth council at the time became involved in voter registration and getting out the vote. The NAACP is nonpartisan, so another group was formed by Hosea Williams called the Chatham County Crusade for Voters. And so my mother was the treasurer of that group, and I became very involved with that because Hosea had been one of our youth council advisors. Now, what we did, because we'd not had any involvement with African Americans serving in office at that time, so we decided to endorse some white candidates that we called the lesser of the two evils. They weren't necessarily the best candidates, but we thought they were the better candidates of those that were running. So 3 o'clock in the morning, we were out putting ballots on the doors of Black people in the community the night before the election. So no one knew in the other side of the community that we were going to do these endorsements and of course who we would be endorsing. So here we had hundreds of young people out going door to door at 3 o'clock in the morning, putting the ballots on the porches of people that lived in those communities so that they would know who we endorsed. And of course, we were very successful. And it went on from that point to become an activity that our community engages in even today. But of course, the ballots are not taken door to door in the middle of the night. So from that point on, I became involved in politics. And when I lived in Memphis, we had an African American, A.W. Willis, to run for mayor. And somehow, I guess I was naive enough to think that he would win. But he did very well. And of course, the younger people were around crying when he didn't win that night because we really thought we had a great candidate. He was a lawyer.
About what?
This was probably 66,
Okay.
somewhere in there.
You were about to say that he was a
67.
lawyer. I think you were about to say
Yes,
that.
he was a lawyer in the city and well known, well respected. So we just thought we had an excellent candidate. And of course, from that time on, I became more involved in politics. And when I came to North Carolina, really became more involved. Alma Adams was running for the school board, and I worked in her campaign and then city council. And of course, Katie Dorsett was the perennial African American candidate for city council. So I became involved in a group that did endorsements at that time, and we endorsed Katie, and of course got out our mailings to let the community know that we endorsed her. And of course, the same thing happened with Alma, and it's just gone on.
So your early years, you were behind the scenes, supporting the candidate, not the candidate.
Well, we didn't know the candidates at that time.
I mean, but
The
throughout your-
adults really were the ones in the Chatham County Crusade for Voters that did the endorsements, but it was the young people that saw to the ballots getting out.
But your early history in politics was behind the scenes more, not out front as the candidate.
Oh no,
Okay.
no, no.
And Katie?
Well, for me, I was not at home. I went away, until very early at 12 years old, and then I never lived at home again. So I guess if you could say, being class president and running for things in your own little school, that was my only involvement until I came here. I was 23 years old when I came here. And I can remember, getting interested because I was involved in a lot of things like the Y and, and other school activities when I had children. But one of the things that got me perhaps more involved in political things was because of a zoning issue. And they were wanting to put a group came here and wanted to purchase the land to put apartments right at our door. And so I was very concerned about that. And then other issues would come up, and I would say, well, we talked to the members of the city council, and they didn't seem interested because they all lived on the same side of town. So I said, well, I want to be a part of that group that makes these decisions, So then I decided that I would run for office. Well, the very first time I ran for office, it was a great deal of controversy. It really divided the city.
You remember what year this was?
I don't know, Prince Graves was running, and you had
Yeah.
to keep Greensburg green and another.
Right.
I would
That would have been the
Probably
70s,
been
though.
the
Wait a minute,
Yeah.
Carolyn, you came to
In the
Greensboro in
70s.
1979, is that right?
Yes.
So it would have been after 79, if you were here.
Well,
No,
think
I
it was-
wasn't here the first time.
No,
Well, I was
okay.
here with
well, it
the.
was probably the 70s.
That was probably
Yeah.
the mid
And
70s.
Okay.
so, I lost because
Okay.
everybody was at large.
Okay.
And we didn't have districts, but we were
For the
working.
benefit of the public listening to this later, explain what you mean when you say at large.
Well, you'd run for all over the city.
Mhm.
And we had, I believe it was 5 city council members and a mayor, I think so, but everybody ran at large. But then we had a group, and every year we'd work and get a little bit closer and a little bit closer because we felt like we needed some representation from districts. We felt like if we had all at large, we'd never win.
Exactly.
And I think that still is
Mhm.
true, But what happened we eventually got what was called a modified district system. And that's what we have now, which is 9 members of the city council and what are there, 5 at large?
Mhm.
I mean,
So
5 districts.
5 districts and
3 at large and a
mayor.
mayor. That's 3 who
9.
run all over the city, 5 who run in different districts. And I ran that time and won. I was
You remember what year that was when you first won?
81, or no, I think I lost in 81, 83, I think
Okay.
was when I won. And let me see if anybody had, Jimmy Barber had been the only other African American who had been on the city
People's
council.
man.
Mm-hmm.
And
Good
so
enough.
I served there, I stayed there. I really was not.
So when you went on city council, there were 2 of you, Mr. Barber and you?
No.
Oh, he
was gone.
Okay.
Mhm. And Earl Jones and I we had 2 black districts. So what we tried to do was when we pushed for this modified district system was to have 2 black districts. Hopefully, we'd have influence. If you didn't have enough votes to be the majority, you had enough votes to influence those other districts. And
Mhm.
that was the goal, that you could influence others so that if you had 9 people, you'd have 2 blacks and you could influence 3 others. And so that's how, and I stayed there on the city council for 2, not quite 2 terms. And I tried to get Alma to take my seat, but she didn't.
No, I was trying to get somebody to take
And
her
so
seat.
I went on.
I'm going to pick up on something being said now. What was that, Carolyn?
Oh, I'll talk about that later.
But then I was more interested in county government. And because I really was interested in, the city to me did sidewalks and street lights and things like that. And I was more interested in education and health and human services. So I left the city council and we finally got a district system for county commissioners. And then I ran for city for county commissioners. So I went there, must have been, I don't know, 84 or something like that. And I stayed there for not quite 2 terms, which would have been 8 years. I think I stayed 6.
Okay, before you moved to Mocana, did I hear you say you tried to get Alma to take your
I did.
seat in the city council?
Yes, I did.
And I take it she didn't the way you.
She didn't. She wasn't interested at the time.
So did any black person take?
Oh yes.
Who was the black person who
Anna
replaced?
Simpkins wasn't.
Simpkins.
Anna
Mhm.
Simpkins, Joyce Simpkins' wife, was
Okay.
appointed. Anna wasn't the least bit interested in
Oh, I was
and
about.
running, or
Mhm.
doing any, doing the work to get there. But she was George Simpkins' wife, so she
Now tell
stayed.
why that's important. Why that she was Joyce Simpkins'
Well,
wife.
George was the president of the NAACP and very influential. Everybody,
A dentist in town.
a dentist in
On
town,
the PAC.
and he was chair of the political action committee. And Anna wasn't involved in anything, but
Okay.
she was his wife.
Historically, he had also been very involved in
All the lawsuits.
all the lawsuits,
Right.
the city,
Mhm.
of that kind of stuff.
Now that can go back as far as integration. And George Simpkins got 9 parents to sue for integrating the schools. And George was one of the ones, and Nan Manuel, myself, I don't remember who the others were. He
had
would
been
go
very-
back very involved.
Very
We
involved,
eventually won that suit to integrate the school system. Mhm.
Now, you got Alma who won't come in and replace you on the city council, and now you on the county commission.
I'm on the county commissioners, and I stayed there. I was the second because Zoe Barbee was killed. She was the first, and after she was killed, we didn't have anybody. Then when we got the district system, then
I mean, having nothing to do with politics, she was killed.
yeah, no, it didn't have
okay.
anything to do
Car
with
accident.
politics.
Car accident.
Okay, all
Car
right.
accident.
Okay.
So I stayed there for 6 years, and I was invited to join Jim Hunt's administration as Secretary of Administration.
What year was that?
When I went down there in 93,
92.
93. He
Well, the election was
elected
92, and
92,
so
he went in
93.
93.
Okay, now I must jump back and forth here. Carolyn, I know at some point you were very involved with Governor Hunt. Were you
Yes.
there at that time?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
We
And
were-
what role were you?
Well, I was special. First of all, I worked in his campaign as one of his campaign managers, and I was responsible for the African American vote. I then, after the election, became special assistant to the governor. And what we did was set up a group of African Americans from across the state to find African Americans to come into state government in various roles, beginning at the top with secretaries. And of course, Katie Dorsett was one of those that we brought in as Secretary of Administration. Thurman Hampton was Secretary of Crime, Public Safety and Crime Control. And of course, we then brought in deputies and assistant secretaries.
Okay. Now, on the issue of Katie being invited in by the governor, were you involved in that decision at all?
Oh, very much so. This entire group of African American leaders
Yeah.
recommended to the governor that certain people be considered for those positions.
And I was
And
shocked.
yes.
I must say, I was, very
Honored but
astounded,
shocked.
Honored but shocked.
I was
that's
shocked
right.
it wasn't me.
And
Well,
but what was interesting when I went to see the governor, all the positions obviously were open. So he talked to me about being Secretary of Revenue. I said, I knew I didn't want that because everybody who had been Secretary of Revenue had left. And I didn't think I could clean it up.
Okay.
So we talked about that, and then we talked about Secretary of Administration. Well, that was more in line with what I could be familiar with, On a larger scale, it was kind of doing what we did at county government.
Now, I'm going to ask something here. Carolyn, had you given her some heads up that she did not want Secretary of Revenue?
no, I
You didn't give her
didn't.
any-
Actually, Katie Dorsett is probably one of the most knowledgeable persons in the city of Greensboro and probably the state of North Carolina about all of North Carolina politics. So she knew what she wanted and she knew the history of all of these positions. And so, you just trust Katie to make the best decision.
So, but Katie, how did you have such insight or knowledge about all aspects of politics in that way? What in your
I
background?
didn't, to be very honest. I remember when I said I would do this, I called Jane Patterson.
Mm.
Jane was Secretary of Administration, but
Okay.
she lived here for a short period of time, and so I could say, ask her. But I said, Jane, what do they do? Very honest, And
It's a powerful position, as I understand it.
yes, but what do
But
they
that's
do?
uh-huh.
So I mean,
In terms of what they do, is powerful. Yeah.
yeah, well, Jane was very helpful, but I was very naive about it. But the average person who goes into state government to head an agency, they don't know what they do either. But anyway,
You're talking with the governor. I interrupted you. I want to hear this.
well, and the governor. If you work for Jim Hunt, Carolyn will know that you had to have enthusiasm. And he said, you're going to be going all over the state, and you're going to represent me at all of these different events, and you're going to learn about North Carolina. It just sounded so exciting.
Uh-huh.
And it really was. It was wonderful to work for him for that time. But one of the things that I had always been told is that when you go into these positions, there are several positions you need first of all, people who will be loyal to you.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make sure that I had a public information person who would be loyal and who would set me up.
Mhm.
I knew that I needed.
They're all laughing over there. They got some real insight to what you just said. Okay.
Well, and I knew that I needed someone he's told me to wrap it up, but I needed to have someone who was knowledgeable about the financial part. And I knew that I needed 2 deputies who were loyal to me. So that was
And
important.
who
to
did
me.
you get? Who was
I ended up with Sam Bowie, who right here in Greensboro. And then Steve Metcalf, who was a county manager. And he was county manager. And I figured if a person was a county manager, they had managed all the things that I would be managing. So I brought Steve Metcalf from Buncombe County.
Okay, now I know that Mr. Bowie is black.
Mhm.
Is
Yes.
Mr. Metcalf?
No, he was
Okay,
white.
So you, okay.
But it was important to me that I have more Black people in my leadership. And I did. I made
And your
sure.
PIO.
And I said public.
Yeah, I'm
information
saying
officer.
who that is.
Yeah,
Who that
she,
was.
Priscilla Smith was
Mhm.
from here.
Oh, okay.
And I wanted to make sure that my division directors, I had a number of African Americans. I ended up with more African Americans in my department than had ever been in the history of that department. Well, first of all, I was the first African American who headed a department of administration in the state, woman now,
Uh-huh.
in the history of North Carolina.
Now, ladies, because I do want this to be able to be used by your children, your great grandchildren, and all for historical purposes, I failed to ask, and then we'll move on from the personal background. The status of your marital situation. What is that?
Well, I am married and have been married for close to 54 years.
And your husband's name?
Warren Dorsett, and he's retired.
Okay.
Mhm.
I married as a sophomore at North Carolina A&T. Billy Adams, he was a student, also a freshman coming out of the military, and was back in school on the GI Bill. And we had 2 children, and we were married for 14 years. And I married a second time for 14 months. So I haven't had 54 years like Katie between the two.
But 14 is critical here.
14 months, and
14 years and 14 months.
14 years and 14 months, and I'm looking for maybe another 14 days or something. but I was married the second time to Bob Rouse, and at that time I recall I was on the school board. I think at that time, so that was like in the early 80s.
So did both of your marriages take place in Guilford County, North Carolina?
No, my first marriage to Billy took place in North Carolina at North Carolina A&T. As a matter of fact, we got married in a chapel in the Harrison Auditorium. I remember that quite well. It was December 18. Second marriage, I was at a conference in Las Vegas. I got married in Las Vegas in a little chapel. We've only just begun.
And so, Katie, you got married where?
In South Carolina. You know how folks would go over to South Carolina? Yes. Yeah, well, it was just a group of his friends and my friends, and we 2 carloads, and we just drove over there.
So you had already moved here to Guilford County.
Oh, yeah.
And then went to South Carolina.
Mhm.
Where in South Carolina?
I believe it was Lancaster.
Okay.
I think so.
And Carolyn?
Was married in Memphis, Tennessee. My ex-husband was a minister, and subsequently we had 1 son.
What was your husband's name? What is your husband's ex-husband's name?
Walker Lee Coleman.
Okay. All right. Now, coming forward, you all are now into your professional lives. Katie, at the age of 23, is working at A&T. What exactly did you do there initially?
I taught in what was called the Department of Business at the time. And when I first got there, I taught typing. Typing was a big thing then. And then we stayed there. I stayed there. And then I started teaching introduction to business and principles of management. And I stayed there for, I guess, 30 years. But I had 2 maternity leaves.
Okay.
So I stayed there, and I left A&T. I guess must have been in 87, something like that.
You know, I made a mistake here, and I'm going to back up on it because this is important. Your college careers. You went to a school in Indiana.
I went to Indiana University for the master's degree, and I went to UNCG for the doctorate.
Okay.
Mhm.
Alma.
I did my undergraduate work at North Carolina A&T. I received my bachelor's of science in art education. I did my master's degree in art education from North Carolina A&T, and I was the first to receive the master's degree in art education. It was a new program
Okay.
at the time, and I went on to do my PhD at Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio.
Okay. And what year was that?
That I finished in 1981.
All right. Carolyn.
And I graduated, my undergrad work was done at Savannah State College at that time, it's university now, with a double major in history and sociology, a minor in economics. And then I obtained my master's from North Carolina A&T State University in adult education.
And what year was that?
That was 92.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry, 90.
90.
90.
And Katie, when you got your degree at Indiana, what year was that?
That was 55.
And at UNC.
UNCG must have been 75.
Okay. Now, Alma, what was your first job out of undergrad?
I went to work in Sedalia, North Carolina, at what was then the Palmer Memorial Institute. It was the oldest college preparatory school for African Americans in the United States.
Which was also a boarding school, wasn't
Exactly.
it? So that's
it
okay.
was. Uh-huh.
Like the school.
And I worked there. Actually, I was there when it closed. I worked for 1 year. And when it closed, I went back to graduate school. So that was 69, 70.
Okay. Carolyn, your first job out of
Actually, when I graduated from college, the NAACP was allowed by the Supreme Court to go back into the state of Alabama to organize units. The organization had been banned for 9 years, and they had to take the case to the Supreme Court. So at that time, a friend of mine, who now is the mayor of Savannah, Edna Jackson, and I went to Alabama to reorganize youth units. And a former staff member at that time, Althea Simmons, organized adult branches. And so I was there for just a year. And then I was hired on a regular basis from the for the position of regional youth director for the NAACP, and served in that position, and then of course several others with the NAACP national office until I left to join Governor Hunt's campaign.
Let me ask, what was the first national event that you all can remember that impacted your lives?
For me, it was March on Washington, 1963. We, of course, took trains from Georgia to that march, and
How old were you at that time?
I was maybe 17.
Okay. And did I hear you say that you went to that march?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well, the first thing that impacted me was a tragedy, and that's the one I can remember, and that was the killing of Emmett Till. And I was living not too far away, and it was
That
in
occurred in
Green.
Mississippi.
Yes, and that thing stuck with me. And when I went to, there was this kind of fear always in Mississippi, but it was more fear if you live out of the state than in the state. And I remember when I was in graduate school at Indiana, I mean, people had me almost afraid to go home for Christmas. Now, the Emmett Till happened after that, but it was kind of all leading up to it. But I remember coming through Greenwood, and we were, I believe, coming to North Carolina, and police officers were all around because they were having the trial. And I mean, that left a real impression on me. And, you still hear about it and see, but that was a national tragedy to me.
Could you just,
No, I was going to say it's interesting because I had forgotten about that. But as a child, I remember seeing the Jet magazine that had his picture in the
Mutilated
casket.
body,
Exactly.
yes.
And that was very frightening.
Yeah, so I mean, that was just left an impression? You knew there were other things that happened in Mississippi that you could remember, but that really left an impression.
So, for the benefit of anyone listening to this, will either one of you tell quickly, briefly, what that was about?
Well, Emmett Till was a young black boy. Was he 12 years old or 15 or something like
yeah.
that? And he was visiting his relatives in Mississippi. It was
Mississippi.
Money, Mississippi,
From where?
Chicago. Okay, well, as little young black boys, he was with some other kids, and they were in this grocery store. And I understand that they were teasing him that, he wouldn't whistle at a white woman. So he went out of the store and whistled at the woman who was the clerk in the store. But she told her husband. And that night, the husband and others went to that boy's uncle's house where he was staying and asked for the boy. He tried not to let the boy go, but they got him anyway. And they took that boy. And they took him and beat him and killed him and put him in the river.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, it was just so sad. But then when they had the trial, they were all found not guilty. But we came through Greenwood it was on lockdown because they were having a trial.
Do you all remember your parents talking with you about the black-white situation at all when you were growing up?
Oh,
What they
yes.
advised you? And how was that? What?
Well, growing up in Mississippi, our farm was adjacent to these white farmers. They all farmers. And the kids would get on the tractors and play together, but you didn't go to school together or anything like that. And they couldn't vote. Finally, I think my daddy went to vote, and they said they put it in a separate box or something. But it was quite evident that we had our school, and my mama taught at the school, and they only paid for 4 months. The county paid for 4 months. The parents got together and paid for the other 5 months of school. And I would road school because I wanted to walk because all the other children walked, but my mama taught that, so I had to ride with her. But they would pass the kids on the buses with the white kids, and they'd be waving and spitting out and throwing stuff out. Yeah, so we saw all of that. Yeah, we were very aware of it.
Alma, you were in up north.
Well, yeah, basically the schools that I went to were integrated, but there weren't many African Americans in the schools, so they were majority white children in those schools. I do remember I spent a lot of time as a youngster coming south in the summers, and I had lots of relatives around High Point, Thomasville, my mother's brothers and sisters, and we would come down to basically spend the summers with them. And sometimes I remember riding in the car coming. We would stop to get something to eat, and it was always this kind of a back door to these restaurants and places that we stopped, but we could never go in. And they would get the food. They would pull up to the door. They'd go up and get the food.
That was
bring
in
it
the
back
South.
to
That's
in the South.
What was it like up north?
Well, I did. It was basically the communities were separate. Most of the communities that I lived in, there were no whites living there, so the communities were separate. But there were some of the children who would come and visit and play with us. And I remember my grandmother, as I called her, did the same kind of work actually that my mother did, domestic work. And she would work in these real exclusive areas of Jersey, for example, in Verona and Caldwell. And when the families would go away to Florida and places like that for the winter, my grandmother would take us up to those houses. And I can remember all of the hand-me-down clothes and those kinds of things. But they were very supportive of our family. And for example, one of them I remember was a doctor. And if there were problems, that we had as children and so forth, they would let us come up to the office and so forth. So just living in the community, I didn't have, there was not a lot of friction there. But I do remember that the schools that we went to were integrated, but there weren't very many African Americans in those schools.
You know, when George Wallace was running for president and he visited, they had been talking for weeks about the fact that he was coming on to Johnny Carson's show, and they were expecting Johnny Carson to, in essence, put him in his place. It did not happen because George Wallace, you know, stayed very respectful. Yes, sir. No, sir. But he said, Mr. Carson, I've been riding around your great city here, and you all as segregated as we are. You know, you have the integrated schools that the teachers are, but at the end of the day,
Right.
they go back to their
That's
neighborhood,
been-
and
that's-
they're no more integrated in the
Mhm.
neighborhoods than we are in the South.
That's
And Johnny Carson couldn't respond because
Yeah.
it was absolutely the
Yeah.
truth.
Absolutely.
And that's why I say up north, even though
Mhm.
we know
Oh, yeah.
everybody knows well about the
Mhm.
Southern way, but up north it was in terms of living, and it still is to a great extent. The Italians have their
That's
neighborhood.
right.
Mhm.
And I
Oh,
was
yeah.
going to say, you know, they would have the various festivals and those kinds of things, and we would go. I can recall we would walk over to those communities to, you know, to participate in festivals, and you come on back home. So yeah.
Well, we would go to the only outlet was to go to town on Saturday, which was about 5 hours away, and we'd all get in the car and you'd go to town. And all you did was walk up and down the streets, you know. But you had you'd go this way, and you'd turn around, come back this way, and of course the little restaurants who said white only, but you did have a few black restaurants around. But you do that on Saturday, and you'd come on back home. You go to your black church. But now the farms, our farm, he was here. A white farm was there. My uncle's farm was next door. It was the next farm over, and then this side was my other uncle's farm. On the other side was white. So it was a mixture of the farms, but you know they were miles apart. You know, so
Children would play together up until a certain age.
they play
and then that
together,
stopped.
get on the tractor, and play together, but you go to different schools.
Exactly. Carolyn, what was?
Well, my back door neighbors, our backyards were buttressing each other, but there was a very high fence, and sometimes we'd hear them over there, but there was never any conversation between us. Again, when we moved to the west side of town, there was a street, Middle Ground Road, that divided us from the white community, but we were just that close to them, and played with the kids. I went to the Catholic school, and so I had to ride the bus. And sometimes I'd see them on the bus going to high school, and we'd not say anything to each other, just acknowledge maybe with a head bow, something like that, but a head nod. But that was the extent of it. Now, because I went to Catholic school, all of the nuns were white at that time, and the priest was white. So it just didn't faze me too much about discrimination and segregation. We did know that there were 3 African American movies in the city. So we had no problems with going to the movies. Of course, we went to our black churches on Sunday. Everything other than the fact that when you went downtown to Crest, which was a 5 and dime store, they had a lunch counter that whites could sit in, and they had a little stand where you, as a black person, could purchase a hot dog.
But you couldn't sit down.
No, could not sit down.
Was that the same in your little town? Where if
you couldn't go in.
You couldn't go in at all.
Yeah, you could purchase the hot dog. And of course, as we walked from school, we passed a Dairy Queen, and there were windows at the front where whites could purchase the ice cream or what have you. And there was a window at the back for blacks. And we never went to that. It just, I mean, I didn't think that much of Dairy Queen's ice cream at any rate. So, but the interesting thing is that, people didn't eat out as much then as they do now.
No.
And so I can remember the first Sunday that our family went to a black-owned restaurant. It was Brown Supper Club, I believe it was called. and had dinner. I mean, that was a big deal
Well, we
for
never
my
did do
daddy to
that.
take all of us out to dinner, you know. So there was never that need to really go to the restaurants, other than if you were downtown purchasing clothing and stuff. You'd probably be down there most of the day, so you would go and get a hot dog at Crest.
Now that brings to mind, you all grew up in black churches. For the big conferences, how did your churches handle large conferences when a large groups of people were coming from out of town, or you all were going out of town for conferences? Or did you ever do that?
We didn't do that.
Oh, we did, and what happened is there were some black owned motels. Of course, we never could afford when we went to Sunday school convention or what have you to stay there. We always stayed in people's
In people's
houses.
homes. See,
Yes,
in my little home, that's what we did.
yes.
And that's why people knew each other all over the United States.
Mhm.
And white folk would assume that every black folk person knew every
Yeah,
other
oh,
black
yeah.
person. And
Mhm.
unfortunate thing is often we did,
Yeah,
because
that's
of the
true.
very nature of
Mhm.
that. And then when, of course, when we could go into the hotels and the motels, that we lost that kind
Yeah,
of
we lost
camaraderie.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was a good thing because that's what we would have to do. Everybody knew you had to put up somebody.
But now, if you would
Exactly.
Oh,
until
yeah.
Exactly.
you
That's
got
right.
where you were going, and Alma talked about driving up to the back of a restaurant in the South
No, we didn't
to
do
do that.
Okay.
I can remember stopping at a store, maybe an old country store, and we bought cheese and what they call pressed ham then, you know, bologna
Uh-huh.
and saltine crackers and
And the
that kind of
big and the
thing.
big wheel
Yeah.
cookies.
Yeah.
Now,
Mhm.
you know, if it was a long trip, my mom would. But if this was, we were just going to South Carolina to visit relatives. This was sort of the snack between dinner and when we returned.
It is amazing that we didn't have more health problems because people would not stop for the back. You had to
No,
just stop and
That's right.
use the side of the road,
Yeah.
Mhm.
both men and women. And women, for that reason, didn't
Yeah.
like having to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, we didn't go to when I was in school. I guess we played basketball with other groups, but you would be close by and you'd go and come back. But at home,
When you say other groups, meaning
other schools,
other
black schools, other
uh-huh.
black schools.
Right.
But what was also interesting, talking about staying somewhere, I told you about having this church on the first and third Sunday. Well, you know, it's always somebody's responsibility to feed the pastor. And so they didn't eat out. So, you know, on this first Sunday, he was going to eat at this house. On this third Sunday, he was going to eat at this house. So we didn't do any taking out. You
Mhm.
cook.
Yeah.
And people be able to buy this chicken so that they could feed the pastor. They may do feed, but they were going to feed the pastor. And that was a big deal. Mm-hmm.
And usually the pastor was a big eater. And
Yeah,
he
exactly.
Oh, yeah,
ate
chicken.
more than one piece of chicken.
Yes, indeed.
I can remember a discussion between my father and my stepmother. My mother died when I was 4, so when I'm in my 12th grade year, my daddy married, and it was coming up her time to host the pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And my daddy said, no, let his wife cook. You've been working all week just like everybody else. And so let her go back home and cook. That's
Well, we didn't do it often, but you know, every once in a while, because my mother was not one who loved to cook, and so every so often it would become her time.
yeah.
And,
And
the
people look
children
forward
would,
to it. They really did.
oh
but it's
yeah,
just-
and then the children wouldn't even be sitting at the table.
No.
You'd be back in the kitchen or something.
praying that he would not be a big eater, as Carol said, so that
Yeah,
something
because
would
my
be left.
family was fairly small. I mean, all of us, he and his wife, he didn't have children, get to sit at the dining room
Oh,
table
no.
and eat. And like I said, your parents would say, well, let the pastor get his
Yeah,
chicken first.
yeah.
And I can remember he'd always take 2 pieces of chicken.
Okay, so now we have you all, you're out working. Tell me, I've heard you say what made you decide to go into politics.
Mhm.
and that is the zoning issue.
The
there.
zoning issue, yeah.
Alma, what did you eventually give into since you did not do it when Katie?
Well, I think, while I was not thinking about being